You've said that Spring Fire is your favorite recording.
Yeah,
Of all your recordings, that's your
It's
favorite.
my favourite recording of anything I've done. And I know that because it was All Saints Tooting, which is a very, very difficult room to be in,
Right.
and since it had to be done on sessions separated by several months from the performance we'd done with the RPO, it wasn't the circumstances were not quite adequate, although I think that the RPO did superbly with it. But what a... I think it's my favourite record of my own stuff, because once again, it seems to me that the form is so clear, and the way he redeploys some of his material, is so brilliant, and he excels at doing things which have been the prerogative of Richard Strauss, but Bax does slightly better. By which I mean, of course, the beautiful work in all horn sections always. It was very funny, actually. I must tell you about the sessions. There are 8 horns, as you know, and all of them have very, very virtuoso parts. At the performance we did for the Norwich and Norfolk Triennial Festival, we had a certain team up there, the RPO horns, wonderful, as always. When we came to do the sessions, at number 7, I think, or number 5, I can't remember. I'd have to try and close my eyes and think. Oh, it was number 5. There was a different horn, so this person had not seen the score or parts, and it was a mere slip of a girl, a really lovely, slim little creature who came and sat down and started to turn the pages, to see if there was anything she should look up, like a good professional. And she saw some of the parts, and her eyes popped out of her head. And there's this one, isn't there, with the top A flat in it. Oh dear, I've forgotten the page now. Where all the horns go up and hold on this note loudly. And I just caught sight of this. She looked through the music, and then it came to the first wonderful part where all 8 horns go up and high at the top and cut right through with the single note, cut through the whole orchestra. And I just spared an eye for her. Her face actually was purple. But she did it. And those naughty boys, the rest of the horns, they were all reaching out, patting her on the head after that bit.
Oh, it's an extraordinary recording. And the Northern Ballad, too, which is a masterpiece.
Do you know, I had an idea about those Northern Ballads. They are actually linked. I mean, there's certain material and certain treatments in all 3 that are common to each other, although they're never reckoned to be connected. But he, after all, did eventually call them all Northern Ballads. Right. And so I was very lucky. I forget who the producer was, but I had a very sympathetic producer in the BBC who let me do all 3 of them together with the BBC Concert Orchestra, who read superbly and played most idiomatically. And when you put the 3 together, it's like a half-hour symphony.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Just about works. I think that they're masterly. I know people feel that the first one is rather trite, with its great fanfare and so on. But I find that it has got a beautiful, great energy about it. And it is ideal as a modern sort of truncated first movement for a symphony.
Right.
And then there's the really a great length of number 2 with that sort of material. And he manages to sustain a really good second movement. And then the third has all the necessary ingredients of a Bax phenomenon.
You've recently said that no other composer holds your attention or brings you as much pleasure as Arnold Bax. And you're also on record as saying that your favorite symphony is Bax's 6th. Is it fair to say that Bax is your favorite composer?
Not quite, Richard. No, I don't really have a favourite composer. But I find that the things that I've most enjoyed with Bax are always renewed and with added intensity whenever I come back to his music. His music is more than any other music for me. It is a music that goes on growing as I know it. And I was always impressed, but now it is because of its individuality, if nothing else, because there's nobody who addresses his moods. Only Bax manages that extraordinary, well, how can I put it, sensitivity with flashes of lurid paganism. How he manages such a range, I don't know. But always when I come back to his music, I find that it has grown in the meantime. But this happens, of course, with all composers. One hopes it does. But with Bax, it's been quite remarkable just for me.
Would you put his achievement as a symphonist on par with Vaughan Williams, Elgar, and Walton, the other great British symphonists?
Yeah, it's difficult. Well, as you mention those people, you are mentioning people that have already, in the eyes of the critics, made some definite contribution. And for anybody like me to come along and say that Bax is their equal symphonically would be dismissed straight away. I mean, there are many people who would give a great deal of credit to those composers, would give no credit at all to Bax. I hope that critics will come along who understand, because certainly for me, yes, he is as important as those people as a symphonist. Because he A, has an individual mood about his music, and B, he actually does things with symphonic form that they don't. I mean, his preferred choice, of 3 movements and so on. He didn't do that for no reason. When it's as often as he does it, he did it for reasons, and those reasons must be formal. I think formally the sixth, well, second, the third, and sixth are formally as good as anything in the 20th century, and to me, expressively as well. But yes. I realise that people would have to know them a lot better than they do,
right?
Which is, of course, why one wants to record them.
Right. One of the advantages of having this website, and one of the purposes of it, is to try to counter some of the negative reviews that Bax has received from critics.
Good for you.
With comments from working musicians who know the music and have played it, and who know it better than anyone else. And what I've always been struck by, how positive and how favorable they are towards the music, and the whole question about being rhapsodic or being loosely structured, it kind of goes out the window.
No, you're absolutely right. And I had, funnily enough, an example of the very thing you've stated there 2 weeks ago. I was conducting in the Royal Academy with one of the student orchestras. It was a celebration of Lionel Tertis, and we did the Elgar cello arranged for with Paul Silverthorne, and then we had Benjamin Dale, the Second Romance, played by Martin Outram. Now, Martin Outram is the Mangini Quartet.
Mangini, right.
And he was saying exactly that they thought they ought to do the Bax. Then they played it, and they thought, yes, it's pretty good, but we're doing it because we ought to do it. And then it started to grow on them,
yes.
And they realised just how structurally brilliant those works are. And of course, isn't it nice that this does happen? That is to say that there is something more to be gained the more you hear it.
Yes.
With so much music, you get what you heard first time. And you may have that intensified. You may have it intensified to the point that you don't want to hear it anymore, because it becomes cloying and clogs up your veins. But with Bax, there's this lovely journey that you take with him, and it gets more and more profound if you take that journey.
Despite the tremendous efforts made on your behalf and other conductors and musicians on behalf of Bax, he's still a neglected figure. Why do you think that is? Do you think that it's just music will never have a popular appeal?
No, I don't think that, because some of those overtures, and smaller pieces, would, if his idiom were generally appreciated and known, they would take the position of being popular little pieces. There are many of them. But it all depends, Richard, on just getting them played. Do you know, I mean, for instance, there are still people who are devotees of Elgar who can't take Falstaff. But you see, Elgar was moving ahead. What had become a popular property of Elgar was Land of Hope and Glory. Anybody who responds to the moods implied by that, not by the words, but by that sort of tune, in that sort of setting, anybody who responds to that and finds that the quintessence of Elgar is not going to like Falstaff. But Falstaff is just as much Elgar as Land of Hope and Glory. In fact, more so, because there is actually, I think there's more labour and devotion showed in the composition of Falstaff, more than that beautiful tune in the march, which must have come pretty easy, I think, to do.
That's one of my favorite of your recordings, is Falstaff.
Falstaff.
Oh.
That's not bad, you know.
No, that's great.
That was, and of course, we had that wonderful acoustic St. Augustine's Kilburn, which I adore.
That's one of the great recordings.
I think I did have a listen to it about a year ago, and I think it's still standing up.
Oh, yeah. What do you make of previous attempts to record Bax's symphonies?
Yes, I think that the lack of success it's a bit hard on the performers, because once again, there were people in those sets who had never conducted much Bax before, and certainly a couple of them who hadn't conducted the symphonies. And as we've been, well, in practically all my discussions with you today, we've come back constantly to this business of needing to live with it a bit, especially so with Bax, even more than with other composers whose orchestration, if nothing else, is more sparse than Bax's. It's this business of getting to know it, and so I think that there have been some very good efforts. I don't want to sound patronising in this, it's awful, but I think that Jack Thompson's number 5
Yes.
is excellent, although I might disagree with him about a certain pulse near the end of the symphony. But generally speaking, the first two movements of that symphony, I think he does something very special for all us Bax followers. And I did, although once again I disagreed with the initial tempo in the older set where Norman Delmar had done number 6. That first tempo, I think, is it's typical Norman. He was a tremendous personality and an eccentric, and suddenly moderato sounds more like allegretto. But notwithstanding, that's a beautiful performance.
Oh, yes.
I
think so.
I think that with regard to number 3, one would have to look back to the original Barthelbach, which is just absolutely outstanding in every way. I don't think that justice has yet been done to 1, 2, and 7.
No.
And that means, of course, 4 as well.
Yes.
But 4 shouldn't be difficult. Shouldn't. I did hear a wonderful broadcast performance once by Maurice Handford, which really, have you really?
I've got that for you.
Well,
Yes.
fancy that, because that's many years ago.
Marvelous
I remember
performance.
thinking, and it was some time after my own record came out, and I remember thinking, as I listened, he's got that there, I got that. I didn't get that, I didn't get that, I'm afraid I didn't get that, but he's got that.
He's got it.
And so those things remain in one's mind. I think, funnily enough, although I've done 6 and 5 many times, I think looking back on number 3, while Barbarolli is my favourite, I quite like my own number 3. Had a wonderful chance of doing it, I think it was 4 times in a week, with the Liverpool Orchestra a couple of years ago, a couple of seasons ago. In the same programme, by the way, was the Morin Cello Concerto with Raphael Wallfisch, who did it superbly. And
a dream concert.
The Liverpool Orchestra, by the time we got to the end of those 4 performances, they were proving what we have been talking They now got to know it, they were inside it, and they gave a most beautiful performance in the worst acoustic of the week. It just happened at the place where we did our last concert. I forget where it was, Derby, I'm not sure. But it was really a dead acoustic. And yet the backs glowed because they knew what they were doing.
I went to the City of Birmingham Symphony when they did Spring Fire with Mark Elder.
Oh, CBSO?
CBSO did it.
Oh, right.
And they did it before the interval. And then after the interval, I went up to a couple of the musicians just to ask them, what did you think of that piece? What did you think? And they all went, that is a masterpiece. Yeah, that's up there with Debussy and Ravel.
Yes.
So why this music isn't done more often?
Right.
I can't understand this.
What I've been saying for 50 years.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
The musicians loved it.
Oh, yes.
Are there any plans for a Bach symphony cycle from you?
Yeah, I've got the plans, all right. Yes. I'm afraid that no one's got the money at the moment. I dearly wish to record the Bach symphonies and the major tone poems. I would hate to be on my deathbed knowing that I hadn't done it.
Bax is frequently described as a very uneven composer. Christopher Whelan once said that most of his music could be discarded except for the better-known tone poems and the symphonies. And Raymond Lepard told me he thinks there are certain works by Bax which really shouldn't be promoted. What do you think about that? Do you think that...
I wonder what pieces he had in mind.
Well, Mediterranean.
Oh, I see.
Something like that, which is
Well,
fair.
I think, no, I take issue with those people, because if Elgar writes a little piece, like, Solid Amour or something, that is taken to be the light, trivial, charming little output of a person who wrote great symphonies. Why not of Bach's as well? I can think of, there's a most beautiful Dance in the Sunlight.
Oh, right.
Those little things, they're not supposed to be vast, symphonic, Sibelian-like undertakings at all. They're a lovely little piece. And I think that even things like Picaresque Comedy Overture has
Marvelous.
such lovely brightness about it. But of course, as with the Elgar small pieces, or green sleeves, of VW, you've got to be able to do them.
Right.
And I think Bax does sometimes suffer. I mean, Mediterranean does suffer from bad performances. It requires a tremendous touch, that piece. And it can so easily be stuck to the floor. It's got to lilt, it's got to bounce.
Eugene Goossens, have you ever heard his recording of it?
No, I haven't. Although, incidentally, have you heard my recordings of Eugene Goossens?
Yes, of course. Yes, I've got those. Of course I do.
Nice things.
It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Great. Number 2.
I think, the Second Symphony. Yeah. Yes, now, the Sydney Orchestra found that quite difficult, especially the scherzo. It really is a touchy French sort of piece, the scherzo. But they realised it was there, they were going for it. The thing that I remember most was the Divertimento with Melbourne, which is a delightful piece. Really, an extraordinary piece.
Great conductor, great composer. You read the article by the interview with Nigel Kennedy in the Gramophone, in which he states he would love to perform the Bach's Violin Concerto with you. Are there any plans for that to happen?
Well, at the moment we are, myself and my manager are offering the Bach's Concerto quite a lot around the world. We're hoping to get a performance or two of it abroad as well as in Great Britain. Nigel, I'd love to record it with Nigel. I'd love to record it and perform it with Tasman Little. And we're going to try to get a performance with her. There's also another very fine young French violinist whose name I've forgotten, who has listened to it and wants to play it. So, we're going to try.
Oh, good.
I did have, many years ago, I had the most lovely performance of that with Hugh Bean.
Yes, I've got that on tape.
Have you?
Yes.
Well, the second movement there, Hugh does something with that which is really quite mesmerising.
I think it's a great performance. It's slower. It's a bit slower. Yeah. Have you heard the Ida Kurtzy performance with Bolt that just came out?
I'd seen that, but I haven't seen it. But
it's a revelation.
Is it?
It's a revelation.
Did you send it to me?
No, but I will make a copy of it and send it to you if you like. It is. It is a revelation to hear it. It's fast. It's very, very fast.
Oh well, I'll take it.
But it takes it very, very well. But I'm curious about that Hugh Bean performance. How did that come about? Was he interested in the concerto? Was that?
Yeah, and I asked him to learn it for me because in those days I was doing an awful lot with BBC Wales.
Right.
And we were looking through the repertoire, and we did quite a number of unfamiliar fiddle concertos. We did the Rodrigo. We did the Grace Williams.
Oh,
We did the Morin. And we did the Bax. So Hugh learned it for that broadcast, and he did play it superbly.
oh, he plays it beautifully. Plays it beautifully. Well, the final installment of Bernard Haitnk's cycle of Vaughan Williams symphonies has just been issued by EMI. And Haitink is the first non-Anglo-American conductor to do all the Vaughan Williams symphonies. Do you think it's important for non-British American conductors to take up this music for it to finally be taken seriously?
Absolutely. I'm delighted that Bernard Haitink did a series because he is, I think, an absolute sounding board for music as a conductor. And he is so sincere in everything he does that even if one were to disagree with him on some musical point, one would nevertheless know that it was put across with complete integrity. And so therefore I think some of those performances are really towering. It's wonderful. And it is very important for that sort of conductor. I don't mean to imply that Bernard is a type or a sort, but I mean really to put him in a class where practically anything he does will have a great deal to recommend it, because he is such an honest conductor. So that's the kind of conductor one needs for Vaughan Williams, who is himself sincere and straight to the point. Very downright.
Yes. So maybe for Bax, that's what we're waiting for.
Yes, although not until I've made my setting.
You first, though.
Yeah, I hope to make my set, and then a number of people will learn them from that. Haitink's marvellous sort of his career exemplifies what a chief conductor is about, because he is fine in the pit, he is fine at his Mahler, he is good at his Vaughan Williams, and so on. And all those things are really they stand as an example to young conductors.
Absolutely.
I'm delighted with that set of his.
The original 1913 version of Vaughan Williams' London Symphony has just been recorded and won a gramophone award on Chandos. What are your thoughts on recording original versions of works that a composer may not have approved for performance? And what do you think of that 1913 version of the Vaughan Williams Symphony?
I think Vaughan Williams knew best. But the last movement, which is where the main problem is, because it was much longer, already is perfect formally for encapsulating your feelings about the whole work. It draws all the strings together, doesn't it? For it to go on any longer, I think BW knew that formally it would be weak if it did. And I can't get away from the fact that hearing the elongation dissatisfies me. I'll just have to work at it much harder. But I still think that whenever Vaughan Williams and Holst got out the rubber or the blue pencil, they almost always improved their work. Right. Once again, it's the thing that Bold used to say to me, you see, about Bax, that he should have had a dose of Royal College of Music where they used the India rubber, rather than the Academy where they begged for another pencil. I don't agree with him, but I do certainly respect Holst and Vaughan Williams for their constant revising.
Sure, absolutely. Along the same lines, you've performed Anthony Payne's realization of the Elgar Third. Do you think he's successful in capturing the spirit of Elgar in that symphony, in that work?
I think he does some. I don't think I know anybody who could have done what Tony Payne's done. He's done it superbly. He's done something quite remarkable. make my only reservation first. That is that absolutely all of it sounds like Elgar. The only thing that it doesn't do, which Elgar invariably does, is surprise me. I don't get surprised anywhere. But then he's done something which I would never have believed any composer could do. And that is with his casting of the last movement, and especially the end of the last movement. He's trying to read. He has actually developed a mood that Elgar had lighted on, but not necessarily developed. And that is this wonderful business of the wagon passes. Do you know that little movement in the children's suite? That has its certain, not melancholy, but wistful and not nostalgic look back and forward.
Yes, yes.
Now, Elgar was obviously going that way with some of his moods, and Tony Payne has actually done it. It's remarkable because you know that you're in a feeling that is not common to Elgar, yet you know that feeling is Elgarian.
Yes.
It's a subtle point, and I haven't the words really to articulate.
I understand
it,
what you're saying.
but he's done that, and that is a remarkable creative achievement.
Yes.
That's talking only about that movement. The rest is wonderful.
It's wonderful. I agree. You once, I read one time in an interview with you, when you were talking about trying to get Bax performed. Have you actually encountered that much resistance in getting Bax symphonies and getting Bax tone poems played on programs?
Oh yes, it's always difficult because you see, nowadays we are governed by the visual media. That's to say, in almost everything, the immediacy of sensation is important. I think personally that it's unimportant, and I think that it damages our appreciation of art and life very badly indeed. But the things we have been talking about with regard to Bax are actually the opposite of what is now popular. That is to say, it's not obvious. You've got to get to know it. Something that repays examination and study. Nowadays, even in most of the television drama, where one felt a few years ago there were some really great developments taking place, but even in television drama now, it is the cliche of sensation the whole time. Now, Bax is sensational, but he places those sensations. He works up to them. He sets you up for them.
Yes.
Well, nowadays it is like pop videos. Pop videos are just constant cutting from one shot to another, most often unrelated. Just anything that's sensational is shoved in. And that is the that's the way we're bringing up our audience. And I'm afraid that Bax then wouldn't get a look in.
Yeah.
Where you have the possibility of recording for broadcast, then managements are a lot easier about that, because you can get unusual repertoire done if it's going to go out on the radio.
Yes.
But there would still be, if one was suggesting it to a management, there would still be reservations in their acceptance.
And that's not changing. You're not finding that that's changing yet.
I think that bless their hearts, because they all want to do a varied program, and usually if they don't do a varied program, it's because they're frightened at the box office. But they are wanting to do a varied program, so when old Handley comes along and says, can we do November Woods, they think, well, wait a minute, it's a big orchestra and it's only 17 minutes. Okay, yeah, we'll let him do it. As long as we get what we want in the program as well.
Right.
Which they do, of course.
Right.
I don't mind bartering one work from
yeah. Thank goodness. What projects are you looking ahead that you are most excited about?
Well, going on with the Simpson. there are several concertos to do. So there's piano concerto, there's a cello concerto, which Raphael and I gave the first performance, and there's a flute concerto. So going on with that, going on with the Bantock series, that is a thrill for me, because the RPO now have got the idiom into their bones, and they enjoy playing it. They play it with great conviction. They play it as if they've been playing it as a repertoire pieces, for a long time. So it's a great thrill to be going on with those and seeing how far we can get, and seeing if they've been successful enough, possibly, to do one of the really big things. I would want to do, of course, Omar Khayyam. Because 3 hours of a piece seems to me to be a good thing to attempt. So there's that. I look forward to this sort of vision of recording the Bax symphonies. Then I want to go. Well, I would very much like to get some of these rarer pieces, like Benjamin Dale and York Bowen.
Yes.
There's a lot of very, very fine music amongst a couple of people like that. What
Question,
are we doing?
I'm
It was
sorry.
about the
Well, I was,
not made.
yes, conductors are born, not made.
It's only true to a certain extent. I know a number of conductors who really would profit tremendously from a more individually crafted technique. Some of them absolutely wonderful musicians, who nevertheless fail dismally to get their wonder across to an orchestra because their technique's in the way. They are all, without exception, they're all intellectually gifted enough to grasp the technique if A, it was taught to them, or B, they decided it was necessary. So it's a very complex
So you would take the
thing.
time to master it.
Well, right, yes, because you see, conductors don't practice.
Right.
I mean, I suppose some of them practice at the piano and some of them practice with gramophone records, but they don't practice what will happen if I bring the stick down in this way to that player. And that's what you've got to do. You are playing an instrument if you're a conductor, and you must mind that you play it well. I mean, if you were auditioning for the principal oboe in your orchestra, and somebody came along and put the wrong end of the oboe in his mouth, you'd be inclined to say, well, perhaps we could see you in a couple of years' time. And yet, conductors do the equivalent of that daily in front of orchestras. They make gestures which are calculated to tear the orchestra apart rather than bring it together. So I can only half agree with the Barbarelli statement. I think you've got to be born with the impulse. But then once again it's so complex because what is the conducting impulse? To me, many people are conductors because they want this spurious sense of power, which is quite ridiculous. I had a lovely birthday party a year or so ago, and I was asked to make a speech at the end of it, and the party was full of musicians. And I said that I was glad to speak because it gave me the opportunity to dispel some terrible rumours that had been going around, that in fact I had been accepting money in order to influence the outcome of concerts. And I said, as you know, especially if you're a player, no conductor can influence the outcome of a concert at all. And I think, the conductors who talk about my Brahms, my Beethoven, they are absolutely ignorant. They can't do any of it without the goodwill and skill of wonderful players.
Yes. Yes.
Once or twice, and had a little correspondence with him as well. He was an immense personality. I mean, I met him only when he was very old, but I remember at rehearsals in the festival hall, hugely bolts, he'd come along, not necessarily when it was his work, but if there was a new work on that he didn't know, he'd come and listen, He was very broad-minded to his dying day, I think. And even then he was a bent man, bent over, but huge, the leonine head, and a woolen scarf round his neck 3 times and touching the floor on both sides, And he also favoured an old-fashioned metal speaking trumpet, and he would sit there in the stalls with this great trumpet in his ear. I corresponded with him because I was fascinated by the economy of means and Holst. And of course, as you know, he was great friends.
Yes, of course.
They helped one another so much. And I said that I thought one of the remarkable things about Holst was that his finest composing techniques were lavished on his small works. For instance, the Suite in E flat for military band, where the entire all movements are made out of the same notes, exactly the same notes. And he wrote back to me that the Suite in E flat wasn't one of his favourite Holsts, but Hammersmith was, where the same sort of metamorphosis occurs. And we had a little chat, I remember, about it at the festival hall. One thing I do remember, just speaking to you then about the festival hall rehearsals that he was at, I remember one when they were doing the Sixth Symphony, and Bolt read through the first movement, and of course, as you know, all the movements are joined. And he went straight along to the end of the second movement. Then he stopped, and he said, "Any ideas, Rafe?" And Vaughan Williams said, "Yes, Adrian. The second movement." And now the LPO, all craning their necks. What's the great man going to say? You know, he's going to get real gem, real wisdom here. And he said, "Second movement." They said they haven't quite got the rhythm right. When they're playing, if they could just think to themselves, 2 hot sausages and 2 hot sausages. And the LPO.